Good afternoon, sports fans from all around the globe. I am your host, Jeff Dawson, East Coast Sports Investors, and this is your midday market report for Tuesday. It's June, it's almost July, it's football time. Well, kind of, sort of. We're almost at that dog days of summer. And today we are blessed and honored to have someone making their debut here with ECSI, someone that I must thank, Mr. Follow Fade, Mr. Lucky, for connecting us. And I've been following him ever since. And we just talked a few minutes behind the scenes, and it's like I'm talking to a mirror image of myself. And I am, as you can see, smiling ear to ear to bring him on. So let's bring him on, the one and only Mr. Ron at Ace Sports.
Morning.
Good morning, Ron. How are you today?
It's a sunny day in Los Angeles. Everything's good. Just relaxing. Doing a little football. Not too much right now, but doing a lot of relaxing. Just had a couple of good trips. Ready to get back into it.
Well, this week will be July 1st, and usually once you turn the calendar, July 1st, for some people it's 4th of July. For some people, it's getting ready for the All-Star break. I will say for most people in these lanes, it's the countdown to late August, Labor Day, and football. You, like myself, have been in these lanes for a long, long time. You have a process. You have ideas. You put pen to paper and you stick to the process, unlike 95% of the people in these lanes. Can you explain to us how you got into these lanes and kind of sort of what is the process?
I'm going to have to go back to junior high when junior high was a term. I don't sing, but I was in a class, Boys Glee. And everybody in that class, they either booked bets or they bet bets. And we would use the newspaper. And I love statistics anyway. Before there was an internet and all that other stuff, we would calculate batting averages and stuff. So they said you could bet anything you want. So I would bet the local teams. And then I would always see in the Ivy League, my bread and butter league for so many years, Brown University, underdog 25 points, underdog 30 points, underdog 35 points. And I would say, wow, I can start a game leading 30-0. I'm going to do that. And then at the end of the year, when I lost more than I won, I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to figure out why they were underdogs by 25 and 30 and 35 points. And so I kind of looked at the Ivy League and I back tested, developed some power ratings, tried to look at efficiencies, scanned the newspapers in the libraries, and figured out, especially in the Ivy League, especially in the late 70s, that it was all about running the ball and stopping the run. So I developed some formulas, started betting the Ivy League games, going to Las Vegas. A bad year in those days, especially when you had no internet, you had various bookmakers where the lines would be 2 or 3 points difference routinely on a Friday or Saturday when you'd call in or you'd get the bet. A bad year would be 60% in the Ivy League because they were very, very predictable. I expanded that to other conferences. And so you could say Boys Glee in the Ivy League got me started. And from there on out, I've designed power ratings. And the process hasn't changed from that very much. The only thing that's happened is that there's 131 college teams now and 32 NFL teams. And a lot of prep work that happens, 4 different phases that I do. For the NFL, I've already done the 4 phases because the draft is over and everything else. And we can certainly talk about that. But it's just being methodical and going through and trusting the process and not overreacting.
You talk about college, and we talked about it Saturdays. It's bedlam, 140, 150 games, whatever the number is. I mean, it's just, and back in the old days, you'd sit down, you'd catch the noon game, and then at 2:30, you'd get the Notre Dame game. And then we were gifted at 7 o'clock on ESPN. And if we were lucky, we caught a late one. Now it's just around the clock, and it's just nonstop action. And with today's society, instant gratification, the in-game wagering, all the prop betting, team totals, and it's overwhelming. How can you explain to the DGen, I guess, or someone that just needs that action, it's okay to slow this process down? And how can you do that?
Uh, so I've been doing this for 40 years, and I can tell you that the bookmakers are going to know everything about 131 teams. And even though I do season previews for 131 teams, just a couple of paragraphs each team and handicapping strategies, I'm nowhere near what they have to do to prepare. If you ask me to set odds, and I do set my odds on all the games, I'm not going to be right 50% of the time closer to the line than the odds makers. That's their livelihood. That's what they're risking. They're in charge of casinos. Their livelihoods depend on it. I need to just pick and choose the best 3 or 4 or 5 that fit what I have in mind. Where does the data say that one team can exploit another team's running game, or where are the defensive backs weak, or the defensive line's not going to be able to penetrate this offensive line, or where is the trap game where this team just came off a very tough triple overtime game against a conference opponent, and now they're playing a good but MAC team or something like that, and they're preparing for their next conference opponent. I'm just using other strategies to pick and choose games. And there are certain weeks I'll have more games than others, because it takes for me 4 weeks out of a 12-week college season and 4 weeks out of a 17-week NFL season to trust the new data, the 2021, or in this case, 2022 data. I'm still relying on old data and charts about returning offensive linemen and so on, but I'm not going to trust the new data until 4 games have been played, because there's so much variance from one game to the next if you start adding up the stats. So in week 5, when I completely cross over, I might have 15 games going in the college. But in week 2 in the college, I might have 6 total. In the NFL, I might have 2 or 3 in week 2. But once we've crossed over into 4 or 5 games, once that first quartile of games has been played, I might have 6 or 7 games, and once they enter the second quartile.
I know Superbook, South Point, Circa already have lines out. I think the Superbook, you can bet any and every NFL game already. Before we jump over to the NFL, college, I saw this yesterday or the day before, Ron. Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, Ohio State, minus 650, or the field plus 480. Now, I know we haven't even taken a snap in college football. I'm not asking you to say, the initial thought obviously is, well, I'm going to take the field, but then you keep looking back and you're looking back and you're looking and you're looking. I mean, we're not even in July yet. If someone made you make that selection today, where would you lean?
I would lean inviting him for a dark beer at a nice restaurant with a good, I don't know. I'm a fish eater, so I like the fish. Your show and everything I do and so on really should be about return on investment. And when you start getting into the future plays like that, it's like a horse race. There may be 10 horses at various odds, but the take is 30%. On these futures, the take might be 50, 60% in terms of that. So unless I'm going to get a great return on investment in my line where I can get like a 10% advantage over the bookmakers, I'm probably not going to make those kinds of plays. I would probably look at it a different angle, and I would say, what team is under the radar? Like, for instance, maybe a Wisconsin, as I'm just starting to get into it. What team can make the Final Four? They'll have odds such as that. This team, yes or no, will they make the Final Four? I'd rather do yes or no than try to get a field bet. So I'm surrounding your answer, I'm not really answering it. I'd probably, if I had to, I'd probably take the 4 teams, because it looks like Alabama and Ohio State are head over heels in a quarterback driven world to be that good. But I wouldn't make the play personally.
I agree. 100%. Let's switch over to the NFL. Saw your breakdown on the which probably this year is the toughest conference in the AFC West. Saw you with Mr. Vegas Chris, and it was a hell of a show, and I enjoyed every second of the breakdown. Outside looking in, a Kansas City team who loses Tyreek, as you said, they lose Tyrann Mathieu. They add Juju. They've added. Some people think they're better depth at wide receiver than Tyreek's had in a long, long time. They've added some depth at running back. Their defense was the problem last year. Now you add Russell Wilson to Denver, and the last 6 weeks that you guys talked about of their schedule is absolutely brutal. Justin Herbert, that team, he is special. He is someone that, if healthy, if the backs stay healthy, I think there's a team to reckon with. Now, I'm right here. My backdrop is at Gillette Stadium, about 45 minutes from Gillette Stadium. I'm not a Josh McDaniel fan. I'm not buying it. I listen. I for 2 decades had to listen to Pat's Nation. Was it the chicken or the egg? Was it Bill? Was it Tom? And we have a bunch of spoiled fans back here. And I know Josh is good. I'm not buying him at the head coaching job over there. They add Devontae Adams. It's a division where anyone can win, anyone can lose. So give us your initial analysis of the AFC West.
Okay, well, this is a fascinating division because it was an arms race in the offseason. So if I break down, let's just talk about the Raiders, for example. So the first thing I do, part 1 out of a 4-part process, is evaluate how 2021 went. And for them, it went better than expected. If you look at Pythagorean theorem kinds of situations, expected wins versus actual wins, point differentials, stuff like that. And Chris and I in our podcast, and a good friend of mine who's in the business as well, Ted Sobel, we're really enjoying putting this content out because we're covering all these topics. We had 2 or 3 shows on Pythagorean theorem. So the Raiders went 4-0 in overtime games. That's not sustainable. Even the coin flip is not sustainable. They're at a negative point ratio. Their expected wins would have been, at most 8? So you're already starting at a disadvantage. Then you flip to free agency, which is a crazy thing, especially for this division. Russell Wilson comes in to Denver. They want to win now. Tyreek Hill leaves. Tyrann Mathieu leaves. So Kansas City is weaker in terms of 2 superstars. The Raiders do a lot of stuff. Devontae Adams, they want to win now. They want Josh McDaniels to have the tools to succeed. He's pretty innovative offensively. We'll see what happens defensively. They haven't been the best drafting team. So I put those pieces together and I'm saying, okay, the Raiders are now a little bit better than where they were last year. Then we look at the draft. That's the third piece of the puzzle. Of course, you take the draft in 2 stages. One is for building for the future. And this was by far the deepest draft I've covered. And I've covered drafts since 1980. I wrote 64 pages on this draft. And I loved this draft. But it's not a 2022 draft. It's not sexy. It doesn't have the quarterbacks that are coming day 1 and stuff like that. It's a future building draft. The Raiders got nothing out of this draft. So you got to knock them down a little bit. And then you look at the schedule. And the schedule, had its pluses and minuses. They're still a relevant team in terms of the big picture. We don't know that home field advantage means that much to them. All in all, when you look at somebody like the Raiders, for me, I'm in fade mode for them. You look and you pick off the best lines. You always should shop for the best lines you could get. Most of them are 8.5s. There was a stray 9 for a few seconds out there. That was interesting to me. So for the Raiders, I'm not so high on. A lot of high expectations for Denver, for example. You got a win total of 10 or 10.5, and they haven't sniffed 10 or 10.5. Is Russell Wilson worth that much? Or is the absence of Vic Fangio as a decision maker worth that much? Maybe so, because I think he underachieved there. Kansas City, I think they're going to get off to a mediocre start, but we know this about Andy Reid. He's different than John Fox, and he's different than Jeff Fisher. He adapted with the times. And so in this wide receiver frenzy, he lost Tyreek Hill, but he gained a lot of pieces, like you said, on the puzzle. Their team is deeper than it was before, could withstand injury a little bit better, maybe might play a little bit better on the defensive line. Not all these teams can make the playoffs, even though they're all really good, and they're going to play against the NFC West. But my assessment is that let's see what happens with Denver and the Chargers. I love the Chargers. I hate their special teams. So there's always a part of me that says, uh-oh, with the Chargers.
And it's funny, you just covered the whole division, and then we end with the Chargers. So what, in your eyes, is the Chargers lacking? Let me ask you that. Meaning is they got the quarterback, they got Eckler at running back, they have two great wide receivers, decent tight end, defense good. They always seem to get injured. Head coach has been an issue, and I'm sitting there screaming at the TV where no one coaches anymore. They blame the analytics, they blame the chart. There's no such thing as coaching. He's one of them. I just, some of the decision making that this guy made is just off the charts. But is that a reason why that you would be a little wishy-washy on the Chargers?
Well, I think the coach will grow. I think he won't be as stubborn. I think he'll listen to the fact there's a time and a place to be aggressive. The game cries for more aggressiveness, but not over the top aggressiveness. My problem with them has been special teams ever since Marty Schottenheimer was there. I mean, he had one year he had the number one rated offense and number one rated defense. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was right after that. It was probably after Schottenheimer. And they didn't make the playoffs. Why? Because they squandered 3 or 4 games on special teams. Your background is New England, you said?
Yes.
Bill Belichick himself goes across the country in non-COVID times to work out kickers and gunners and special teams players and so on. The Chargers, whether it be San Diego or LA, just turns the other ear and says, oh, we need a kicker? Okay, let's get one out of the yellow pages. Oh, we need somebody to defend punts and kicks? Well, what does a punt block really mean in the NFL? But they've had too many of them. They've switched special teams coaches coming into 2022. This is a team that should have made the playoffs at least 6 of the last 7 or 8 years. They were that good offensively and defensively. They have a dynamite secondary. They've taken pains to improve their pass rush with Khalil Mack, who will make the other players Bosa better. They've fortified their offensive line. The only 2 things they lack are consistent special team play and stretch the field wide receivers. But they're a playoff team in my mind if they can be 15th in special team metrics. They're a playoff team and maybe win the division.
I'm at DraftKings right now. Actually, I'm going to, don't hold me to this, but we're going to do this to make the playoffs. I'm going to just pull up their odds right now. We're going to use the AFC West for you. And I'm going to just throw some numbers at you. And, again, you could have a slight lean, no lean, or as you did before, you can grab your nice stout and a piece of fish, and we'll move on to the next one. Chargers, minus 160, yes, plus 130, no.
Okay. I'm going to have a caveat here. Knowing myself and knowing how I do things, season wins, these kinds of bets and so on, 75 to 80% of my plays will be under, because the public is always about overs in everything. Over for player props, over for season win totals, over for game totals. There's value in the unders. Now, having said that, the only look with the Chargers on that at minus 160 would be over. Return on investment, you would say that would probably be about a 62% chance to make the playoffs. I'm just, taking numbers out of my head. So to basically break even, you have to be right 5 out of 8 times. And I think there's probably closer to a 7 out of 10 chance that they'll make the playoffs.
Raiders, yes, plus 160, no, minus 200.
It's a tough division. Within the division, I think the Raiders could win any game on their schedule. They play Kansas City tough. They generally played Denver tough. There's a terrible situation for them against the Chargers because the very last game of the season last year went 70 minutes and 70 absolute full minutes until they were knocked out of the playoffs. And the best situation you could have is to play them again in week 1. Big Charger advantage in that particular game. Based on the division and how I feel about everything with the Raiders, there's only one way to look, and that would be not to make the playoffs, especially if you don't like them. I mean, what are you laying? -2? What do you say? -230 or so?
Minus 200.
-200. So I think it's easier in a way to bet under their season win total than the -200, but those were the ways I would look.
Chiefs, yes, minus 215, no, plus 170.
I can't touch that one at all because the problem with quarterbacks, we've seen this with Aaron Rodgers twice, is the minute he goes down, the odds change by 10 power rating points. The difference between Rodgers and Justin Love, or Rodgers and any other backup that he had on the 2 years that he was hurt. Last year, he missed a game due to COVID restrictions, I think. They barely scored. If you lose Mahomes, your season is shot. So I don't like to bet yes for teams where I think one player down and you're dead.
Okay. The last one on this one would be Denver. Yes, minus 150, no, plus 125.
Yeah, I think Denver's fascinating. If they were in another division, I'd be more excited about them. But this is, a tough schedule because it's a tough division. But in reality, Russell Wilson should mean a couple of more wins. And in reality, the loss of Vic Fangio should mean a little bit better for them as well. I would be slightly bullish on them, but I wouldn't jump to bet the playoffs given the opponents, and I wouldn't jump to bet the over-under in season wins given that they haven't sniffed the 10 in so long.
Okay, so on DraftKings, that's what I was going to follow up here for you on that. The Chargers under over right now. And again, let me ask you a question. You talked about unders, and that's where the value is. A lot of people will try to get cute and do the alternative lines. So for instance here, the Chargers are over 10 minus 135 and under 10 plus 115. Now, again, we have 17 games this year, not 16. Now, if someone liked the Chargers to go over 10, yet they don't want to lay the 135, do you encourage them to go with an alternative of 10.5? Or is this just a stay away? You stick to your process.
Mm-hmm. This is one area where alternative lines are helpful to me, but I flip it the other way. Give you an example, because if the number's already a whole number, I don't mess around with that. I don't go from 10 to 9.5 or 10 to 10.5. But like Jacksonville last year, and I had an opinion, a pretty strong opinion, that Urban Meyer was a dumpster fire. Drafting college players to play in the NFL. We've seen it with Lou Holtz. We saw it with Bobby Petrino. We've seen it with so many coaches. Urban Meyer wasn't going to be any different with a bad drafting organization. Their number, I think, was 6.5. I did 6.5 and I did 7. I bumped it alternative line because when you're on a whole number, it takes another whole number to beat you. So to ask Jacksonville to go 8 and 9, and I think I laid like 160. Usually a whole number is worth about 50 to 60 cents on the line. So no way did I think Jacksonville was going to go from 1 win or whatever they had the year before under Urban Meyer to go 8 and 9. So if you give me a number that's a half point and I want to bump it up or down or something like that, I might consider it. But when it's already on a whole number, I'm not going to use alternative lines.
All right. So for instance, we've been talking about the Chargers here. So I mean, Vegas basically saying 10 and 7. Yeah, they might get to 11 and 6. I mean, is for value stance using DraftKings right now, is the 35 cents if you did like the over worth, it's going to take 11 to cash, 10 you push, and they'll be holding your money for 5, 6 months.
This is where everybody has to do their homework, whether they talk to you, whether they talk to me, whether they listen to our podcasts and so on. Get the variables together and then put percentages. These are fixed numbers. We're lucky. We're not dealing with 162 Major League Baseball data points. We're dealing with 17. And the most likely result is that the Chargers are not going to go 14-3, and they're not going to go 4-13. So you're only dealing with 5 or 6 different numbers. You've got to come up with what percentage of the time do you think the Chargers will win? 7 games, 8 games, 9 games, 10 games, 11 games. Then put that into perspective, then bet it that way, and then determine if the 135 works. If you think it's 50-50 whether or not they're going to be over 10 or under 10, then minus 135 is a terrible deal. But if you think it's 70-30, then 7 times you're going to win, let's say $100, and 3 times you're going to lose $135, then it's a really good deal. Especially when you have, 10 is a tricky number because you're going to get a lot of pushes in there. The odd numbers are better. But each person has to decide that for themselves, whether that 135 works. And it's really based on what your win expectation is.
Okay, so the Chiefs right now 10.5, and they're at a minus 110, and it's almost like the times are changing here. Where the novice, the public, the DGen looks at it and says, "I can get Patrick Mahomes. He's only going to win 11 games here." What are we missing here, Ron?
What we're missing is the fact that it's a brutal early schedule, and the 3 division opponents have all improved their roster. Russell Wilson is an instant improvement. Their head coach is an instant improvement. Khalil Mack is a little bit of improvement. Trevor Penning on the offensive line is an improvement. The special teams coach hopefully is an improvement. Devontae Adams for the Raiders is an improvement. Their games, I like KC, but their games got a little tougher because their opponents got a little bit better. And they'll miss Matthew Smarts, his instinctiveness on the field. And they'll miss Tyreek Hill a little bit at least, because he can turn a 10-yard play into a 90-yard TD. And so instant scoring will be missed a little bit. So I think it's a fair number. 10.5 is a fair number for me. If you really think that the other teams are not as improved, then maybe you like KC a little bit more than that. But for me, they could win 10-7, and they might still win the division because of how tough it is at 10-7. Might be tiebreakers. A little too tough for me. I don't see return on investment on my end. But I like Andy Reid as a coach, and he'll get the most out of him.
Denver is a flat 10, minus 120, even money under 10. And trying to find the Raiders. We already did the Raiders. So again, they got everyone at 10 wins, basically 10.5.
Yeah.
Is that mathematically impossible?
No, it is possible, but they're going to beat up each other. So you're already going to have what do they play? They 6 games against each other. So you're going to go 12-12 automatically. That's 12 losses for the division. Kansas City has the first place schedule. The Raiders have a trickier schedule because it's not the 4th place schedule. You'd have to go all the way down to Denver to find the easier schedule. And they play the NFC West. San Francisco's good. The Rams are good. Seattle's sneaky if you have to play at Seattle. Arizona's offense is good. Their chemistry, we'll see. It's just not easy. So asking these teams to beat out an Indianapolis team and a Tennessee team where they get to play 4 games against Jacksonville and Houston, they're better. They may be better teams than Tennessee and Indy, or at least comparable, but they don't have the same schedule advantages.
I'm going to close with this, Ron. I had Julian Edlow on a couple of weeks ago from DraftKings. I painted this picture. After the last 2 years, what Buffalo has been through, I think this is Buffalo's year. I think that they're going to win the AFC East. I think they're going to be the number one seed. I went on record to say Bills, Dolphins, Jets, Patriots for fourth in the East. Buffalo opened up +1 at the defending champs against the Rams. It's going to be banner night, ring night. It is now a pick 'em, and I've even seen Buffalo -1 in a couple spots. Can you give us some insight? I need to tame the wagons, and it's not, Josh Allen and Diggs' AFC runaway freight train this year. Am I drinking the Kool-Aid there?
Buffalo. So when I do my schedule report, my schedule analysis, which I think is an underrated part of how to approach the off season, and it's available. You can find it on a couple of things. I'll tweet it out. But it's an 8-page schedule analysis, and it really goes into the detail. It also includes my current power rating for whatever that's worth. And Buffalo has my highest power rating. Anything can happen. We saw that in the playoffs last year. Every one of the games was decided randomly, really. If you played each of those playoff games in the last 2 rounds in the AFC and the NFC, 100 times it would have been 50-50. A coin flip decided the fact that Buffalo was out of the playoffs. They're the deepest team. They've been carefully constructed. They took a rookie quarterback, Josh Allen, made him an accurate passer, surrounded him with wide receiver talent, got him the offensive line that every rookie quarterback must have in order to succeed. Look at the ones who succeeded: Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and Josh Allen. Look at the ones who failed. They didn't have the offensive line or the tall target at tight end. Buffalo is so carefully built that they are my favorite to go to the Super Bowl. I don't think it's drinking the Kool-Aid. Maybe drinking the Kool-Aid to put the Jets third because the offensive line is not really there yet. I wouldn't underestimate New England's capabilities over the Jets right now. And Miami's a fascinating team. That's why I do this in 4 stages. I've been high on Miami. I've been low. I'm kind of in the middle of Miami. They're just fascinating to me. So, but Buffalo's my favorite in the AFC overall, and certainly in their division.
I'll end with this. You just brought up Miami, who is a fascinating team. I'm a big Waddle fan. They add Tyreek Hill. They have one of the, I think, underrated tight ends with Gesicki. I don't know what they're going to do with the running game. They got about 5 or 6 guys back there now. Tua, when Tua came into the league, I compared him to a Steve Young. Now, I'm not saying he was going to become Steve Young, the lefty, not the long, strong bomb arm, but accurate. With the injuries, he's not as mobile. I think it's going to come. It's a boom or bust year, and it's going to be fascinating to see how him and Tyreek connect. Would I be just throwing money away? I talk about it as pizza and beer money, and it's a big, big number for Tua for MVP.
That would be asking too much, probably. I grew up with Stabler and Blitnikoff, the lefty to Blitnikoff. I'm left-handed. I like Tua as a quarterback anyway. I think it's fascinating the weapons they built around him and the coaching they built around him. They'll be much better offensively. But boy, there's a lot of changes, and changes take time. Chemistry takes time. Kansas City went 4-4 with a rebuilt offensive line before they got better. I'm rooting for Miami. I'm rooting for Tua. I think he's a very smart, very accurate slant type quarterback. He has Kenny Stabler tendencies in terms of throwing that slant route. And he's got guys now who could turn, we talked about Tyreek Hill. He could turn a 10-yarder into a 90-yarder, and that's what Miami hopes to do. I think it's going to be a lot of slant passes for them, and it's going to be fascinating to watch.
You can follow Ron at Ron A Sports on Twitter. Ron, absolutely fascinating. Blinking, it was 35 minutes. Hope we're going to be able to get you on regularly. Your breakdowns are fascinating. I want everyone to get as much information from you. And you got about July 1st is coming up on Thursday, Friday. So we got about 2 months to go, Ron.
We have 2 months to go. The work in college starts. You mentioned July 4th. That's when I start in earnest with the college. We're downtime with the NFL. Hopefully I've done enough where nothing's going to change much in the landscape over the next 8 weeks or so. And you'll see, I'll be, Chris and I and Ted as well, we're going to be talking about money management. We're going to be talking about division previews. We're going to have guests on to talk about the college landscape. We're just doing this to provide some content, just sharing ideas and thoughts so that hopefully your listeners, our listeners are going to get a better idea of how to navigate the handicapping scene. And thanks so much for having me on. It was a pleasure meeting you and talking to you.
We can't thank you enough. Jeff Dawson at EC Sports Invest, Ron at Ron A Sports. Follow him, must follow. He's got some podcasts up there with Vegas Chris, breaking down the AFC West. I think you said you got 3 more to go, correct?
3 more to go. Next comes the always exciting NFC North. Chris and half the people I know on Twitter are Detroit Lion fans, so you may not want to miss that one. I don't know how I gravitate to all these Detroit Lion fans, but we'll talk about the Lions and whatever other 3 teams that are in that division with them.
I won a lot of fantasy way back. I had the connection of Scott Mitchell to Herman Moore.
Oh, jeez, another lefty.
I'm flocking to the lefty.
There we go.
All right. Thanks so much to our listeners. We can't thank you enough. And everyone, I'll be back at 6 o'clock with Scott Webb for the closing bell. Go follow Ron at Ron Sports. Great information. We can't thank you enough. And have an amazing day, Ron.
Thank you. You too.